This is what's showing on Facebook.
Yeah. Okay, good evening, Facebook land. Thank you for joining us tonight. I don't know, we're right at the 7 o'clock hour. I hope people are logged on or about to log on as we're going to get started. We have lots of great information to share with you tonight and lots of good resources in terms of the experts we have with us tonight. So we're really excited to give you as much value and as much content as we can. And we have a ton of people registered and questions submitted in advance that we will be answering for you tonight. So if you haven't submitted a question and you would like to do so, then you can, you can send those in the chat. You can do them anonymously or not, and they will make their way to our eyes before the end of the presentation. We just want to make sure everybody who has a question has an opportunity to get it answered. We're going to try to stick to the schedule, but if there are more questions than we can field in the time allotted, we may go a little extra with the idea that we do want to make sure that you get your question answered. So welcome. I'm going to start and do the introduction. So I'm Deborah Whitson. I am the founding attorney and owner of Whitson Law Firm in Elizabethtown, New York. I am not only an attorney, I'm a mediator. I do collaborative divorce, and I am an author. I'm also owner of Mediated Online Solutions, LLC in Keene, New York, where we do divorce and family law mediation. So that's me. Seated next to me is my husband and expert in the field of mental health. This is John Haverlick. For those who don't know, we are connected in our community. And John is a certified social worker, family therapist, mental health counselor. He's got probably more years of experience than he wants me to say, but more than 50 years of experience doing individual and family counseling. So he's worked with lots of people, helping them stay together as couples and helping couples and individuals break up when their relationship is not at a place where they desire to work on saving it. And then on camera with us in another frame is Tonya Kelly from Edico Partners of Clifton Park, New York. Tonya is a certified divorce financial analyst and a chartered retirement counselor. Tonya and John and I have worked together professionally in the arena of helping divorcing couples through the emotional and financial components of going through a divorce. And so we're going to kick off. The title of tonight's program is How to Prepare Emotionally, Financially, and Legally for Your Divorce. So we'll start with the emotional component, and I'm going to turn it over to John. If there's anything else you want to say to introduce yourself, please feel free to add in, and then share what you would like to share.
Okay, thanks, Deb. And I'm honored to be here tonight to speak with all of you and to share what knowledge and expertise and experience that I have in this area. And I want to congratulate all of you who are joining us here tonight to become better informed about how to potentially go through the process of separating or divorcing. One of the things, this is not something that is simple or easy, and it feels to me that while we have an hour of time tonight, that we're really only going to be able to touch on some of the main areas of importance, and hopefully that you will find that useful. When I was thinking about where to start tonight, one of the main questions that came up for me was, first of all, how do you come to the decision about separating or divorcing? I think that is something that I found in my work and in my own personal life, and having gone through a divorce many years ago, that part of the process can be very difficult, agonizing, confusing, and emotionally difficult. And a couple of points I'd like to touch on that I hope will be useful is that one of the things that I think that is important to try to think about is with the relationship that you have, is it a healthy or an unhealthy relationship? And what that means, of course, can incorporate many variables, but I think some of the main components for me that might include is, do you feel safe? Do you feel respected? Do you feel that you are recognized for who you are? Is there a reciprocity in the relationship, or does it seem to be a one-sided relationship? And what do you feel you are getting emotionally, physically, socially, sexually out of the relationship? And I think a lot of this is not just about your partner and how you view your partner, but where you're at in the relationship. Once you come to a point where you feel that the relationship that you have is not something that you want to remain in, then initiating that process becomes the next most important part of the process. And I think this is something unlike what I did when I went through this. If it weren't for some very key friends and some family members who were there to support me, I think it really is critical to think about reaching out for professionals such as Deb, who is an attorney, for her legal expertise, and for someone like Tanya for her financial expertise, and someone like myself for the emotional and social supports. And I think before you even begin to start the process to approach your partner, it can be valuable to consult with professionals to get some guidance about what it might be for you once you end up separating or divorcing. I think the more knowledge that you have ahead of time, the better prepared you will be in going through the process. And even with doing that, there's always going to be the unknowns that are going to occur. I think the other thing is to prepare yourself that this, in all likelihood, is not going to be a simple, easy process, and why it is important to identify who your support team can be in going through this. And to get input and feedback from people, and to try to be open to that, because these are often very life-changing events for any of us, and also for especially when you have children involved, for them as well. I can go on, but I don't know how much time I have to speak here. But those are some of the main areas that I wanted to cover. And I think one last point I want to really emphasize is that you think about how you take care of yourself as you go through this process, because there can be a lot of feelings and thoughts that will come up about second guessing yourself, about doubting yourself, about waffling, or not really being clear about is this the right direction to be going or not. There's often no way of knowing how these procedures will play out, and you want to make sure that throughout all of this that you think about how do you take care of yourself.
Thanks, John. So I have a couple of follow-up things, because that's what I do. I don't always have to have the last word in our relationship, I think. But so one of the things I want to just pick up on, you said surround yourself with a support network. And I think that's huge and important advice. I think some people think divorce is a legal process and they need an attorney, but it's so much more than that. It's basically a financial separation of the parties as well. And you've got all of the dynamics of the emotional and relationship stuff, including how will your relationships look going forward, and what relationships you want to preserve while you're going through the process. Maybe you're close to your in-laws. Maybe you have mutual friends with your spouse and you're wondering, are the friends going to pick sides when we're no longer a couple? And how would I keep those friendships if they're important to me and not interfere with my soon-to-be ex's relationships with them? So there's a lot of things that the professionals here on this program can assist and guide you with. But more than that, the network of friends and family who are going to be supportive and good listeners for you, and a shoulder to cry on and a place to scream where it's safe to just vent and scream when you're not doing that in a public way or with your ex or around your children. But I want to just caution that well-meaning family and friends they're not your financial advisors and planners. They're not your therapists, and they're not your lawyer. So be careful about listening to their advice in those topical areas, because every one of us has a friend of a friend of a friend who has some nightmare of a divorce story, and they will tell you that from their, nightmare of a divorce story that may be a complete unicorn type of situation, that you should or should not do something financially, or you should or should not do something legally. And chances are that advice doesn't apply to your situation, even if it applied to theirs. So be careful about taking advice that you should be getting from professionals from your well-meaning family and friends. And I'm not saying they're giving you bad advice to steer you wrong. They mean well, but just understand what they're qualified to advise you on and what they're not. And then the other thing that comes up for me a lot, John, is I get asked like multiple times a week, how do we tell the children, or how do I tell the children, for the people who are coming to me in the planning stage and they haven't initiated anything official, and maybe their spouse and they've had a conversation and said, yes, we know mutually we want to get a divorce, but they haven't told the kids. So what tips do you have for people on how to tell the kids?
Great. Yeah, a very important area to address, and to prepare yourself for, so that you can do it in as constructive and supportive and age-appropriate way as possible, because depending upon the age of your children, you really need to tailor what you say to them, so that they can understand it to the extent that is important for them to have information, but not to give them too much information. So one of the things that would be ideal is that you and your partner sit down together beforehand and plan out that you're going to speak to your children together. That is the ideal. Now, I know sometimes that's not always possible to do that, but that would be what I would encourage you to try to aim for. And that both of you plan to express to your children in very simple terms, such as your mom and I, or your dad and I, are no longer going to be living together because we're not happy with one another, or that we're having too much difficulty with being able to get along. So just very simple things like that, without really getting into what the details are for you or might be going on for your spouse. The other thing that I think is really important is to reassure them, each of you, that you're going to be there for them, and to try to give some specific about that, in terms of how you're going to try to maintain the routine that already exists. And that really is one of the things that for children pretty universally is that they do better with dealing with upheaval in their lives if they know that most of what their lives are going to entail are going to remain relatively predictable. And when that isn't possible, to then let them know, to give them specifics about the changes that are coming up. More immediate changes, not long-term changes, so that if there's going to be a move where one of the parents is moving out, to let them know when that's going to be happening and where they're going to be going, so that they're prepared for those kinds of upheavals. And also if the parent with the children is going to move, to try to know as much as possible about where that's going to be so the kids have the details about that. Because when there's uncertainty or unknowns, that often leaves kids floundering more and feeling more insecure and confused.
That's great. Thank you. Tonya, I want to give you the opportunity to weigh in or ask any follow-ups of John, but if you wish, but otherwise I'm going to turn it over to you for your top tips on financially prepared.
Well, I think the first thing I have to say is that you've done a wonderful job of helping people understand their needs for the attorney and a family person to help them. It's not unusual, excuse me, for a family to just go to an attorney and get help when they don't understand that there are other family members that need help and assistance, or that they need help and assistance. So it sort of leads me into the team approach where, okay, Deb, you have gone through some of the legal issues with him. John, you have gone through some of the other ones, but there are really at least 3 components to the divorce. You know, I don't know how many people come to me and say, how am I going to live? How am I going to support myself? What am I going to do? And Deb is an attorney. John is a family advisor. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And I sort of assist both of them in figuring out what's going to happen with the family financially. What is realistic for them? What is really, what's important to them? You know, I need to sit down and not do the legal stuff, not do the family stuff, but say, okay, here's the facts and the figures. What do you need? What do you want? What can we expect? And how do we help John and Deb get through this process and make it fair for all of you? I think that at least the 3-pronged process should give them some relief and some confidence, because there's certain things they're not going to address with me that they're going to address with either one of you. And actually, in the end, for all 3 of us to work with a client ends up being more economically feasible, because we can always use our own expertise, which means basically, okay, Deb, you don't want to be a financial advisor. John, neither do you. Do I want to be an attorney? No, 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 no. And I understand the family issues. I'm, you know, a divorced mom of 3 kids, and now I have 4 kids and 7 grandchildren. But going through that process when my youngest daughter was 13 or 14 was totally tragic. And I didn't know how to help her. And family situations can get so volatile, so out of hand, that that's not what children need. So to divide up what's going on when you're going through a divorce is a good thing, because then you can go, oh, we have Deb, we have John, we have Tonya, we have these people to sort this out. And then they can come and isolate financial details with me, and we can figure out, what do you need? What do you want? Where do you need to be? How can we do this? And then I can go back to Deb and say, this is what has to go on. and help her sort it out, or go to John and say, these are the family issues that are going on right now. I mean, believe it or not, there are 13, 14, and 15-year-old kids that are worried about finances. They don't know how they're going to live, where they're going to live. Well, it's not like they're two. It's they're young adults that need to understand. So the parents need to understand and be comfortable so that they can deal with this. It's just amazing to me that more people don't hire the team or work with the team, because we can help you through all facets of this. And it's very important, very important. And I read through a lot of the questions that were submitted and everything, and they're also tied together. It's not like this question, I mean, and John, Deb, and I had talked about it. Not one of these questions really deals with one facet of divorce only. They all intertwine. They really, really do. And what my credentials are, I'm a certified divorce financial analyst. I've been doing this for a number of years, and I'll tell you, it's been extremely rewarding to be able to help people. This eases the pressure on them when they're finding out, I'm going to be safe, I can afford my house, I can do what I need to do. But for them to feel the financial security helps the family and the whole divorce process work.
Tanya, what advice can you give, or how can you speak to, it's quite common in my experience that the way spouses divide up responsibilities, that often the financial responsibilities fall either exclusively or more heavily on one spouse versus the other. And sometimes we have a spouse who's somewhat in the know, but the other spouse took care of the big stuff. And then there are spouses who come into my practice and they don't know the names of certain documents. They don't know what a 401k is and whether that's the same thing as a pension or not as a pension. They don't know anything about a budget. They don't know the account passwords to the online investment accounts and things like that. So how can you help and guide someone in that situation? Because clearly at my hourly rate and with my training in law and not financial advising or planning, it's not economical for that client for me to take them through Finance 101 class, right? And I'm not even qualified to teach Finance 101. I know a lot about finances because I do divorce work, and finances are a big part of that. But can you talk to that or speak to that in the context of a divorce? It's also, by the way, a time when you don't want to have to learn all that stuff in a crash course because you're already really stressed about all the shit going on in your life, right? And
Well, I've had people bring in shopping bags worth of paperwork, and to help them go through it and sort it out. And I just need to know from them what's going on. What documents can they obtain that are right there in front of them? I mean, a lot of times, a family will have, okay, I don't handle these bills, but you need to be looking at the bills, the numbers, everything else that you can find. I'm sorry, but I say check the mail. That is a big thing right there. There's certain information that you're entitled to that will come out in your discovery, Deb. So I actually had a lady who was very meticulous about it. She spent 3 years collecting documents, and it really doesn't have to take that long. It absolutely doesn't, but that was her personality. So most people would just say, okay, here's what you're looking for. Give me your story. Where does your spouse work? What do they do? How long have they been there? what is going on in your life? And I just sort of ask a zillion questions to try to find out where the information might be that they should be looking for.
I think in my work together with you on the cases that we've had in common, some of the key things that I think clients have given me feedback on as being particularly valuable was this concept of, yeah, we know we want to separate, but nobody has sat down and thought about, we have one amount of family income, and now we're going to divide that and support two households, and how that impacts standards of living, choice of where you live, whether you buy or you rent, and just forging ahead and separating and setting up a commitment to a separate household that maybe in the long run isn't financially feasible when you're dividing one pot of income and resources into two parties' hands, supporting two households.
And there's a lot of ways to go around that. I mean, not around it, I shouldn't say that word, but to figure it out. It's like I had a couple that decided on nesting. They couldn't afford two separate households. The kids were used to living in a big household. And what they decided to do was rent an apartment, leave the kids in one house, and the parents switch back and forth. I mean, there are so many options to think about, but it's also an affordability issue when it comes to a house. It's like, okay, you haven't worked in 20 years. All right, so what can you do? What should we expect? And the person may want to go back to school, may want to pursue their former, career. It's really so individualized that it's very difficult. And I'll tell you, the worst thing that has to happen is, sorry, neither of you can afford the house. And then it's my place to step in and help them figure out how they're going to manage this going forward.
I also love, and my clients have given me, great feedback on the fact that the work you do with them sets them up not just for a plan of how might their divorce settle out or what they should be seeking in the court proceedings as far as the financial aspects of the divorce and the equitable distribution and support issues like spousal or child support, but projections of where they are likely to be in 2 years or 5 years or at retirement age if they're not retirement age. That's something that the judge who's handling the divorce is not necessarily even thinking about. They're just looking at the today. How are we going to divide up what these people owe and what they own today? And how are we going to fix support obligations today? So thinking future forward, I think gives people a lot of comfort to know where they stand and to know that there's a path to getting back into more secure, stable financial situation than they may be feeling at the moment because everything's in flux in the context of the divorce.
Yeah, and it's like, where am I going to be 20 years from now? I don't look at it today, 5 years from now, or 10, but it's like the long term. What is going to transpire in the next 20 years of your life? What can we expect to happen? And how are we going to make sure that it works out for you? So mine is not like a today situation. It's more of a planning for the future situation. What do you need today? What are your expectations for the future? And that's really important for helping people feel comfortable. They have to feel comfortable. It's like, okay, yay, I walked out of court, I got this, but how is that going to work? How is that going to last? How is it going to benefit you, in the future? So we have to look at children's educations and retirement and everything else and make sure that that's something that will work for them.
That's great advice.
If I could also add in on this topic about separating or breaking up a household and dividing the financial resources. I think we all have a tendency to get emotionally attached to things. I know I have a
Oh,
problem.
please, John. That's one of my biggest things.
I know I have some old t-shirts that I probably should have gotten rid of years ago that I have this crazy attachment to. But I think one of the things that I think going through a separation or divorce really makes us confront is what really do we value and what really does bring us happiness. And I think it really is an opportunity to think about what do we really prioritize. And if we're really taking that step of ending a relationship and breaking up a family, especially if there's kids there, that there are some underlying values there that are not about money or material possessions, but really more about what's in your heart and what you need to make yourself whole and to try to have as best a quality of life as possible.
Well, let me lighten this one up a little bit and give you something to smile about. There was a couple, and the husband absolutely adored his Tupperware. He packed everything in Tupperware. They were getting a divorce. She took all the Tupperware lids. And I said, wait a minute. Why are you guys financially fighting about Tupperware? You could buy a tractor trailer load of Tupperware for what you're arguing about. Now, I think, the family heirlooms, all this kind of stuff, but Tupperware, it just doesn't, doesn't click with me,
Financial sense,
so
right over the
my
list.
thing is sort of to help make them understand, whoa, you're paying $5,000 because you took the Tupperware lids, and I don't understand. So I can tend to be a little bit more blunt about some of these things and bring them back to a realistic part of life. I mean, a couple fighting about Christmas. Well, they're Jewish. Christmas didn't matter to them, but they were fighting over who was going to have Christmas with the kids that didn't even celebrate Christmas. So there's all these little things that go on with it. It's like, is that rug really worth spending $3,000 to get it when you don't even really care about it? And you paid $250 for it. So, John, it's just making them understand the realism and not standing by their guns and saying, this is what I want.
Good point.
That adds to the stress.
Mhm.
Yep. All right, I'm mindful of the time and the long list of questions that we want to get to, so I'm going to do my piece real quick. I'm going to speak a little fast, so that's what I do anyway. So my top tips, I have a couple for you. One is to consider your options for how you get divorced. So you've maybe reached the decision now, if you're here on this program, that you want to get divorced, but how will you do it? And a lot of people don't know that you have options. It's not just run to the courthouse, be the first to file and hurl accusations at your soon-to-be ex. That is an option, in my opinion. That's the least appropriate and useful option. And you might think that's weird coming from a lawyer, but I've actually written a book, and because if you're on this tonight and you registered, you're going to get a free copy or a downloadable PDF or ebook version of my book, Divorce Like a Pro, A Better Way to Break Up. And it walks you through your options, from the kitchen table to mediation to collaborative divorce, and then to fighting it out at the courthouse. And the way I've just laid that out for you in a progression you can increase the cost and the stress as you move up that scale. So there's kitchen table, figure most of this stuff out, work with each other, try to be level-headed about it, and have someone like a lawyer draft up an agreement for you and help you with the uncontested divorce. Get your emotional supports and some financial advice thrown in there, and you've got a pretty low stress, low cost way to get divorced. Now, if you're getting a divorce because your communication was the main thing that led to the breakdown of your relationship, then the kitchen table option may not be the option for you. So if you need a little more support, structure, guidance, safety in terms of, I don't want to be attacked and insulted and called names while I'm talking through this with my soon-to-be ex, mediation is a great option. It's also low cost, low stress, and you keep control over your outcomes. You're not turning over decisions to anybody else. The mediator isn't deciding it for you. They're just providing a structure and a framework to help your communications be more effective and fruitful. And if your mediator is an attorney, you get some guidance on how things work in your jurisdiction. So at the outset of this, you all learn that we're all New York-based practitioners. So anything I say in terms of giving you kind of legal information tonight is based on New York law. So keep that in mind if you live in another state or country. But an attorney mediator can give you some good guidance. They can tell you how child support, spousal support formulas work. They can tell you how dividing retirement assets are handled in New York State in the context of a divorce, and help you through that, and give you that little extra support and structure that the kitchen table doesn't offer. Next up is collaboration. That's where you officially engage a bunch of professionals, not a bunch, but at least 3, a divorce coach, someone like John, a financial professional, someone like Tanya, and a collaboratively trained divorce attorney. And your spouse hires a collaboratively trained divorce attorney, and you all commit to work through these issues, to share information, come up with solutions, do brainstorming. And there is actually it's not allowed to threaten to go to court or threaten to litigate. So everybody's in it to win it and to help you through it efficiently and effectively. And let me just say to you that if you're thinking that a number of times already tonight, we've talked about engaging a couple of professionals as you're going through this, and you're thinking, how am I going to afford that? Well, I want you to consider that amongst the 3 professionals sitting here, I am the most expensive, probably by a magnitude of 2 or 3 times what you would pay people with these credentials. And you might find that obnoxious. It just is the marketplace, I'm sorry to say. But if you're going to come to me and spend 30 minutes crying over how frustrated you are that you're supposed to took the Tupperware lids, that's wasting your money, because I'm charging you the highest rate amongst this. I'll listen to you. I'll feel bad. I'll get mad. I'll say, I'll call the other attorney and try to solve this, but that is not a good use of your money. If what you really wanted was to vent emotionally or get some support over helping to identify and clarify your values. Is that a real value that you want to stick in it and fight for and spend money on, or can you move beyond that? So in the end, the process is much more efficient, quick, peaceful, and less stressful if you engage more people and put the work on the shoulders of where it belongs. So I am not going to do your 20-year financial projection. I'm not qualified to do that. So I am not going to give you great advice on how to help your kid who is struggling in school or acting out behaviorally during the process of the divorce. Not my area of expertise, so I wouldn't presume to give you that advice. But if you come to me with those issues and I'm empathetically listening to them, I'm charging you the highest rate of all of us. So keep that in mind when you consider your options. And then last on the list is the litigated divorce, where you both plunk down big retainers for courtroom-based attorneys. And there's a lot of mudslinging. It's stressful, it's unpredictable, it's expensive, and it can take years of keeping you stuck in that emotional limbo where you can't get closure. And it's just, building and building over time, and it wears you down. And so many people in that forum just wear down, and they settle at year 2, what was offered at the beginning of the case that they thought was unfair. They're just giving up. They run out of money and they just can't handle the stress anymore. So that process is the least desirable. And in my opinion, if you have children, putting decisions about your children's welfare and future in the hands of a stranger in a black robe is insanity. And I say that with the utmost respect for judges who try to get it right, but they don't know your kids and they don't have time to get to know your kids. And in the courtroom, they're really going to get very limited information about you as parents and your kids' aptitudes and talents and challenges. And And so you should avoid that, in my opinion, at all costs, and find one of those other ways along the path to the courthouse to take a detour and get off the path of the courthouse and figure this out. Now, I know sometimes that, you know, you have to have two people willing to do mediation or sit at the kitchen table or do collaboration. You have to agree. And sometimes your partner is not going to agree and they're going to just, you know, wage war. In that event, you need an attorney who's a problem solver, who will not throw gasoline on that fire, but will help you get out with the least amount of scorching as possible and try to neutralize some of those things. So you got to be real careful about who you pick as your counsel. And so it's important, you know, picking up on what John has said about getting clear on what your values are. If your values are not to sling mud at the other parent and make it hard to co-parent, if your values are not to be attacked, so you don't want to go on the attack, then find an attorney, interview some attorneys before you select your attorney and ask them, what's your approach? Do we run to the courthouse first? Is there any chance of negotiating or settling? Are there other paths that you can see that I can go down with you, Mr. or Ms. Attorney, that don't involve the guerrilla warfare tactics? If those are your values, if your value is to avoid that, find an attorney who's going to be a problem solver attorney to work with you and support your values and your goals.
And I think, Deb, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but one of the biggest things I talk to people about is remain amicable if you can. Just keep the peace. Sit down and talk. I mean, it's just like, my God, you guys got married. You have to have something in common that you can talk about. I don't care whether it's kids or vacations or anything like that. But most of all, you need to remain amicable with each other to solve this, because a war, no one wins. No one really wins.
In our law firm intake process, we ask each potential client what they liked about their partner when they were happy, and to say one good thing about their partner as a parent if they have children. If they refuse to say either of those, we may decline the case, because that's just not right. I mean, it's just not true. You didn't go into a marriage without something that you like. And if you can say something good about the other parent, I know that this person's on a path to warfare. So now, let's just say you were the victim of extreme domestic violence and your partner's sitting in prison because they attacked you. That's the exception to this rule, of course, right? So there are legitimate situations where we wouldn't, that I wouldn't look askew at somebody who says, I can't say anything good about my soon-to-be ex-spouse or my co-parent. So it is important to remind people there are good values in the other party, and to tap into that and say, you know, so let's just, we're not here to say that they're the best person on the planet or that you still love them madly. We understand that that's not true right now, but you demonizing somebody is going to make the divorce process a lot more unpleasant and harder on the professionals that you're working with.
It can't eat up your life. It should not eat up your life.
Nope. All right. And then I would be remiss if I didn't give this last tip before we go to the question and answer session, is be careful of two things: your social media and everything else you say, do, or communicate. So if you have a good lawyer, they're going to tell you to be very, very careful about posting anything on social media. So our law firm rule is you must not post about your relationship, your court proceedings, your mediation, or anything about the process of divorcing, or we reserve the right to release you as our client. It's just so counter to an efficient and effective and a less stressful outcome to your problem. Also understand that in New York anyway, check your laws if you're in another state, one person can lawfully secretly record a conversation that they're having with you without telling you. It's secret, right? So they could have a phone on record in their pocket and they could goad you into saying obnoxious things. And then guess where those end up? In the judge's chambers or in the courtroom or in a motion. So everything you say everything you text, everything you email, and everything you post on social media, even if you think you can delete that stuff, there are traces of that that can be recovered. So don't say it or communicate it or shout it or whatever, or post it if you don't want a judge to see it, or you would be embarrassed if a judge would see it. So please, that is just so important. This is not the time to ask Facebook land or the TikTok world for a sympathetic ear because of how awful your ex is or what a crappy parent your ex is. This is, none of that belongs. So keep it to, kittens and puppies and recipes and so on and so forth. And keep your relationship off of social media. That's always just good advice generally, but if you're going through a breakup, keep off social media. Maybe take a little social media vacation. Okay, that was my little speech, my little preachy speech. Sorry.
If I can I
Yeah.
just a couple of quick comments in relation to that. Try to be your own best person as you go through this process, and try to do this from a place of empowerment rather than a reactive place. Now, none of us are perfect, and we're never, well, especially in stressful, difficult, unfamiliar situations, we always will misstep or say something or do something that we know probably we shouldn't have done. But that's why it becomes so important to have that support team that you can vent to an attorney or to a financial advisor or to a counselor like myself, and then get yourself into a place where you can, as Tanya was saying, approach the situation from an amicable or as calm a place as you can be.
I like to say, communicate with your soon-to-be ex or your de facto ex after your divorce if you're co-parenting, like you would communicate to a coworker. If you wouldn't say it to a coworker, if you would be disciplined in the workplace for saying it to a coworker, then you shouldn't be saying it to your ex. So keep it civil. You don't have to love each other. You don't really even have to like each other, although that's a bonus if you do like each other and you just realize you're not good together as a couple. But you have to be civil. You have to be the co-CEOs of your children's lives if you are going to co-parent successfully and not mess up your kids. So you got to put all that other angst and anguish and anger aside for the sake of your sanity and the children's well-being. There you go, being preachy again. Sorry, let's get to the questions. I'm going to say the question, and then, depending on whose expertise maybe is most relevant, we'll just jump in and answer. So the first is, what financial documents do I need if I'm going to file for divorce? And what if only my husband has access to the account information? So I'll start from a legal point of view, and then Tanya, please supplement if I've missed anything. But in New York, we have something called compulsory financial disclosure in divorce actions. So both parties are obligated to give 3 years worth of bank statements, 3 years worth of credit card statements, 3 years worth of tax returns, 3 years worth of retirement statements or pension account statements, and share value information on vehicles and so on and so forth. So those things are required. If you don't have access because you don't have passwords, there's two recourses you have. One is if you have an attorney, your attorney will get those things from your spouse, or you'll know that those are coming across the aisle in the exchange of records from your spouse who does have access. But it is a great idea to try to get your own access to those things by requesting password access or going right to the source, calling up the credit card company and asking statements be emailed or mailed to you, or going to the bank and asking for statements to be printed out for you. Tanya, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would say be sure you get your credit reports, freecreditreport.com, and then you can understand if you're on an account that you didn't know you were on, if there's a credit card, okay, and one person owns the credit card or has responsibility, but you are a joint creditor, or if you are just a signer. There's all these different things, and you're entitled to the free creditreport.com. So I would start with there. Find out anything else that you might be on that you don't think you are. That's important. There's a lot of accounts that people, oh, I didn't know I was on that checking account, or I didn't know I was on that savings account. You need to find out. Your credit report is going to show you a lot of stuff, and you've got to start there. We had one lady, her husband had had like 3 different jobs with medical institutions that were continually changing names. I ended up going to the Department of Labor for her to trace down. Okay, I had called the administrator and they go, well, no, we don't administrate anymore. So I had to get the Department of Labor introduced to the case so they could sign an administrator so she could get her money. So these are things that you just don't know are going on unless you get the mail and check your credit reports. Absolutely. You know, I don't know how many times there are accounts where there's a beneficiary on them or you don't know who's on it. Just get everything you can get. Save it. I help you go through it.
That's great, Sonia. Thank you. Next up is, do I need to hire a divorce coach for my children or only for myself? So John, do you want to take the lead on that one?
Sure. So prior to getting the separation divorce process going, I would strongly recommend that you consider hiring a counselor to discuss with them and to think through how you would want to go through this and what the concerns are that you have, both about your children and about yourself. And divorce coaches, I think, without exception, regardless of the complexity or the intensity of the divorce process, can be beneficial. They can be an important stabilizing and guiding party as you're going through this. And how much you actually involve them or not really is up to you. It's not like you're turning over to somebody else to dictate to you how much they will be utilized or not. So I think definitely for kids in going through this process, that they have someone that they can have as a neutral party in this, to have support and guidance from, and also to give you feedback about things that they might be having difficulty identifying or articulating to you, to key you into some of the challenges that they're facing. And also clearly for the two of you that are going through the divorce, having a divorce coach to help you with all of the emotional upheaval that you're going through, I think is really critical.
Thanks, John. All right, we're going to have to pick up the pace here because we've got lots of questions, and some we've addressed in our for our top tips. So if you worded your question and we've addressed it in a dialogue, and you're not hearing your question fed back to you, we think we've already addressed it. So it's not that we're ignoring you. With respect to, there's a question about what if we can't afford to live apart? And I know Tanya touched on this, and knowing, what your assets are and your resources and your budget, and maybe there's some creative things that she could help with. But I want to mention here that if you really can't afford to get the whole Magilla divorce and live apart and end it all and just move on, a postnuptial agreement might be something for you to consider, where you set up some rules about how you live together in the household. Maybe there are places you can kind of live separately under the same roof, or stay out of each other's way under the same roof. and separate your finances and get that nailed down, but share expenses of the same place that you're currently living. So that might be less than ideal, but it might be a financial solution.
It is a perfect and really great suggestion.
Thanks, Tanya. Okay, moving on. How do I go about filing for divorce if my spouse lives in another state? So every state in the US has residency requirements. They vary from state to state. So that is to stop people from forum shopping and going to a state that's more favorable to their financial position, perhaps, and to make you go really far and have to defend a divorce in a faraway state. So if somebody can file in another state on very short duration of residency, it's usually just to dissolve your marriage, but the court wouldn't have jurisdiction in that other state over custody and finances, perhaps. But if you have connections to New York, you were married in New York, or you lived in New York for a year, you could file in New York, notwithstanding where your spouse is currently located. You would just need to get them serve the papers wherever they are, and then they would have to address the New York divorce action. All right. Next question. How are the assets divided if we have bought everything we have during the marriage? So in New York, we're an equitable distribution state. We're not a community property or equal division state. So equitable is intentionally more vague than equal. They oftentimes end up in the same result, but equitable is what's fair under the circumstances of your situation. But in New York, we define anything that was acquired during the marriage, whether it's an asset like a car or a debt like a car loan, as a marital asset or a marital debt, even if you bought that car and you took that loan just in your name and you're the only one on the car title. That's a marital car and a marital loan that is subject to being divided in New York State. So the questioner's scenario, everything is marital and the court has jurisdiction to divide it up. Will it necessarily be divided up 50-50? Not necessarily in New York. The longer the marriage in New York, the more likely that things are going to land on 50-50, but there could be lots of circumstances where a New York judge might determine that it's not fair to divide things 50-50 because of misconduct or grossly unequal contributions, or somebody producing more and the other overspending and wasting more. So those can come into play. This is for John. Can we use the same therapist if we are divorcing?
So the general rule of thumb would be that that would not be a great idea. Now, again, there's always exceptions, and it, I think, depends upon the level of cooperation that's going on between you and your spouse. I have met with couples who have who are in the process of separating and divorcing, and that can be helpful to help facilitate a conversation and the communication that otherwise they would be having difficulty having on their own. The other thing is, though, if it really is a situation where there is a major power differential, then maybe it's really not a good idea, and it would be better to have separate individual counselors, and then encouraging those counselors to speak to one another so that it doesn't become two different therapists getting two different versions of what's going on, and perhaps inadvertently reinforcing some negative processes or patterns that you really want to try to avoid.
It seems also that the parties should be clear if they're in a low conflict situation and there's a fairly level playing field in terms of power in the relationship, that they're both on the same page about the goals of therapy. So if one is thinking or hoping is to revive and recover the marriage or heal the marriage, save the marriage, and the other is like, I definitely just want some help having a sane and civil breakup, then you're putting the therapist in an untenable situation. So you got to be really clear about what your goals are and express those upfront with therapists, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. We talked about building a support network. Next question. What happens to our marital home? So if you're standing in court in front of a judge, this will cover a couple of questions. You will need a fair market value opinion of the home. That usually means a certified appraiser, unless you're both stipulating to the value from some other source. Even you can just agree, we feel like it's worth 500,000. But otherwise you'd need an appraisal. We would need to know if there's a mortgage, loan or loans, like a mortgage and a home equity, a first and a second mortgage, how much the principal owed on those loans are at the time you started the divorce action. Take the market value minus out the loans and you have an equity value. And that's the equity value the court will be addressing. So there's really kind of three simple options. And if you're standing in court, one is husband buys out wife, two is wife buys out husband, giving the fair share of the equity in the home to the party who is going to relinquish title, or you sell it and split the net equity after you pay the realtor or whatever, and you pay off the mortgages. So those are the three options in court. If you're going to resolve your matter out of court through mediation, collaboration, or just working it out at the kitchen table, you can come up with all sorts of creative things. You could say wife will own it until the youngest child is out of high school, and then the husband will assume ownership and we'll exchange money at that point. You can continue to co-own it. Neither of you live in it. Rent it as an Airbnb and split the income. So there's all sorts of creative things if you are outside of court figuring out your future. But the judge has really basically those three simple options I described a moment ago if you are standing in court and letting the judge figure that out for you. There's a question about taxes and children, and Tanya, you can weigh in on this too. I just want to say my disclaimer is I am not a tax attorney, I'm not a CPA, and I do not give tax advice. I know the issues related to divorce and taxes, and I can tell clients when I think they should get tax advice about these things. But I will just say here that once you're divorced, the Supreme Court judge handling your divorce can decide how you divide up child tax credits and who claims children on what basis. And there are a number of ways you can tackle those things. If you don't have something specifically in a marital agreement about how you're going to file taxes after your divorce, then the IRS rules will apply as to who's entitled to claim a child on their tax returns, and you're going to be governed by the Internal Revenue Code in that regard, unless your Supreme Court judge makes a different ruling or your agreement has a different arrangement. I don't know, Tanya, if you want to weigh in. It's asking specifically about taxes and children. You don't have to weigh in, Tanya, but no.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, did you want to add anything? I mean, I don't
No,
know.
I think that there are some things that are, I shy away from
Mhm.
accounting problems and tax issues because the tax laws change all the time. And I think that, like you said, unless you have a specific agreement as to who's going to claim whom, then it is going to revert back to tax laws.
Okay, great, thanks. I just didn't know if you had anything else that you share with your clients. All right, student loans, how are they handled during the divorce? So if the student loan was taken out by the student before the marriage, then it's not a marital debt. Remember my definition from a couple questions ago. If it happened before the marriage, it's not marital. So if you came into the marriage with student loans and you get divorced, you're going out with your remaining student loans. If the loans were incurred during the marriage, they technically are considered marital. I have to say that experientially, most judges would say, since the knowledge is going in the student's brain with that student, then the loans probably should follow that student and not be shared. But where I see judges weighing in differently on that is for some families, if they are taking student loans during the marriage, they're sometimes borrowing and using some of the loan proceeds to cover living expenses, household expenses, childcare expenses, and not just educational expenses with those loans. If they are not taking sort of the federally or New York State educational loans, you can just take loans for education and use them for whatever. So if you've used some of your loan proceeds for joint marital living expenses, that the court may handle that differently. Um, somebody asked about postnatal depression and would it impact child support and child custody? I'll weigh in, I'll ask you to weigh in, John, on the, what are the pragmatic pieces of that, but I would have to say that having a mental health diagnosis or a mental health condition should not affect custody at all, as long as you're appropriately managing that. So if you're not managing it and your behaviors are out of control and they're potentially negatively impactful on your ability to parent or on your children directly, it could. But the diagnosis or the condition itself should not be a bar to you having custody or regular parenting time. And I don't see that it would influence child support unless that condition, like postnatal depression, was temporarily keeping you from being able to work a job you customarily worked when you didn't have to. That would be sort of an involuntary impact on your earnings capability. And so that may mean you receive more support because of that, or you pay less support if you're the person paying while you are hopefully temporarily impacted by something like postnatal depression. And from the practical standpoint, do you have anything you want to say?
Yeah, I think there can be a tendency to for any of us to want to pathologize certain ways of expressing feelings or how you're feeling, especially during this heightened period of emotional upheaval. So I think, first of all, it's important to be careful about starting to label certain behaviors or expressions of emotion during this period of time. And I would hope that if there are any underlying emotional stresses that have been going on even prior to a separation or divorce, that you would be thinking about seeking the support of a therapist to help to get some better understanding of what is going on, how that might get intensified during a breakup of a family, and also how to deal with that being targeted as a way to manipulate you or take advantage of you.
Yeah, good feedback. Thank you. All right, I'm mindful of the time. We're going to try to get through these quick. Understand that if you have to go, this is recorded and the recording will be shared with you if you registered. If you didn't register, send a private message and I will make sure that my staff sends you out the recording so you can find the answer to your question. We'll go real quickly. I think with what's left, a number of them are things we've already addressed. So we're going to try to cover them all if we can. I'm going to lump two questions together. And the next one is, can my lawyer also be our mediator? And then a related question is, would it be advantageous to consult with an attorney before entering into mediation, so that I would know what I should be advocating for myself for during mediation? So the attorney, if you have an attorney already engaged and then you learn that attorney is a qualified mediator and you want to use that attorney for mediation, my practice in that situation is, first of all, try to avoid it because it does create a little bit of potential confusion and ethical issues. But the other party would have to be advised that you had consultations with me in this instance as an attorney, and I would give the other party the same opportunity to consult with me and get some questions answered individually. And then you would both have to waive the potential conflict of interest because I was officially your attorney. And the reason for that is the mediator has to maintain neutrality. So when you hired a person as an attorney, they are by definition your advocate, not a neutral party. They are in your corner to fight for your legal rights. So switching from attorney to mediator can be done with some important steps and everybody agreeing that that's the case. So better practice is to approach an attorney mediator up front and say, I'm interested in talking with you first about mediation. Once an attorney has served as your mediator, though, as a neutral party for both of you, that attorney cannot be either party's separate attorney if mediation breaks down. So I couldn't go off to court with you if I started out as your mediator jointly and it breaks down and then one party says, I really want you to be my attorney in the court proceeding now. I couldn't do that because that would be a violation of my commitment to being a neutral facilitator. So the crossover can be a little bit complex, which is why you should think about what role you are consulting the professional on and make sure that you and the professional have a discussion early on about the pros and cons of hiring as an attorney or as a mediator who happens to have attorney degree. And then the other question is, would it be advantageous to consult before mediation? Absolutely. I think that's a good idea, unless you're going to use an attorney mediator who could give you both information about the law. But if you want individualized rights and explanation about that, definitely get that consult. And many mediators would allow both of you to have attorneys in your corner and invite them to participate in the mediation with ground rules. So the attorneys have to be supportive in the mediation process and not derail it and not take it over and not co-opt it, but they can be with you alongside you to give you individualized advice at various points along the mediation process. There's a question, can my ex give joint property to his new girlfriend? So I get a lot of questions like, can I be sued? Can they say that in court? And the answer is people can say and do lots of crazy shit. So could he do that? Could your ex do it? Yes. Would it be lawful and appropriate? No, not if there's a divorce action pending. Both of you are bound by court rules to engage in good financial behavior, which usually means maintaining the status quo, and you cannot sell or give away or destroy any marital property. So will it happen? And will you end up having to seek recourse in court? Maybe. Could it happen? Yes, it could. Would you have remedies? Yes, you would have remedies in court. Let's see. I think we've covered all the rest of the list, but there's a new question that just came in. Oh, somebody's just filling me in. Okay, go, Tanya. We're good. I gotcha.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. I didn't realize that message was from you.
Yeah.
I would have responded sooner. It was a question.
Bye.
All right. I think we got all of the questions, including any new ones that came along during the session today. So I want to, first of all, I know Tanya had to hop off. She had grandkids arrive, and that's important because after all, we are all about family. So my thanks and John's thanks, of course, go out to Tanya, and I appreciate, John, you preparing and joining us tonight and giving great information to the audience.
A pleasure to do this with you.
Yeah, and I appreciate the audience
Yeah.
for sending in such good questions.
Yeah, right.
tonight.
Yeah. And kudos to all of you who are watching this and have submitted questions. It really speaks to the thoughtfulness that you're giving to a very difficult and important decision that you must be struggling with. So I applaud you all for being on this chat tonight.
Okay, so I mentioned at the outset that if you registered, you're getting lots of free goodies, including my Divorce Like a Pro, A Better Way to Break Up book, and a bunch of other resources that we will be sending along to you. If you joined us because you found us or you saw the post but you didn't pre-register, make sure you send a private message through the Facebook Messenger and leave us your email address so you can take part in all of those bonus things. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to submit those as well, and we'll have the appropriate expert respond to any questions that you didn't get a chance to ask tonight. And let us know where Carlene, my assistant, who put this all together. Thank you, Carlene and Joshan, my marketing assistants. They're going to post in the comments how you reach our firm and how you reach Mediated Online Solutions. And I'll ask them if they have Tonya and John's contact information to do that as well. Otherwise, we'll include that in the email so that you'll have it there and in the email if you don't pick it up from the comments section of the Facebook feed tonight. So thank you to everybody. We're so glad that you joined us. We're here to help you, especially if you are in New York State, where we are all licensed to practice our respective professions. And we hope that we can help you someday. So thank you, everybody. Good night. God bless.
Thank you. Bye-bye.